From translation, ISV International Standard Version, this 151 day of the year, today we are reading passages Esther 6-10, Esther chapter 6, verses 1 to 14. That night the king couldn't sleep, so he ordered the book of memorable deeds, the Chronicles, to be brought and read to the king. It was found written there how Mordecai had told about Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's eunuchs who guarded the threshold, and how they had planned to lay hands on King Ahasuerus. The king said what honor or distinction was given to Mordecai for this. The king's servants who attended him replied, nothing was done for him. The king asked, who is in the courtyard? Now Haman had just come to the outer court of the palace to tell the king how he should hang Mordecai on the gallows that he had prepared for him. The king's servant said to him, Haman is standing in the courtyard. The king said, let him come in. Haman came in. The king asked him, what should be done for the man whom the king wishes to honor? Haman thought to himself, to whom would the king want to give more honor than me? So Haman said to the king, for the man whom the king wishes to honor, let royal robes be brought that the king himself has worn, and a horse on which the king has ridden, with a royal crown placed on its head. Let the robes and horse be handed over to one of the king's most noble officials. Let him array the man whom the king wishes to honor, parade him through the city square and proclaim before him, this is what is done for the man whom the king wishes to honor. The king said to Haman, take the robes and the horse, just as you have proposed, and do all of this for Mordecai, the Jew who sits at the king's gate. Leave out nothing that you have proposed. So Haman took the robes and the horse, arrayed Mordecai, and paraded him through the city square, proclaiming before him, this is what is done for the man whom the king wishes to honor. Then Mordecai returned to the king's gate, but Haman rushed to his home, mourning and with his head covered. Haman explained all of this to his wife Zeresh and all of his friends. His wise advisers and his wife Zeresh said to him, if Mordecai, before whom your downfall has begun, is of Jewish descent, you will not prevail against him but will surely fall before him. While they were still talking with him, the king's eunuchs came and brought Haman quickly to the banquet that Esther had prepared. Esther chapter 7, verses 1 to 10, the king and Haman came to banquet with Esther. On the second day, as they were drinking wine, the king again asked Esther, Queen Esther, what is your petition? It will be given to you. What is your request? Even to half the kingdom it will be granted. Then Queen Esther replied, if I have found favor with you, your majesty, and if it pleases you, let my life be spared, this is my petition. And let my people be spared, this is my request. For I and my people have been sold to be destroyed, killed, and annihilated. If we had simply been sold as male and female slaves, I would have kept silent, because the trouble would not have been worth disturbing the king. King Ahasuerus asked Queen Esther, who is he? Where is the man who has dared to do such a thing? Esther replied, an adversary and an enemy, this evil Haman. Then Haman was terrified in the presence of the king and the queen. The king arose in his fury from the wine banquet and went out to the palace garden. But Haman remained behind to beg Queen Esther for his life, because he saw that disaster had overtaken him. As the king returned from the palace garden to the banquet hall, Haman was falling on the couch where Esther was lying. The king exclaimed, will he even molest the queen while she is with me in the palace? When the king's words left his mouth, they covered Haman's face. Harbonah, one of the eunuchs attending the king, said, look. The gallows that Haman prepared for Mordecai, who spoke up for the king, stands at Haman's house, 50 cubits high. So the king said, hang him on it. And they hanged Haman on the gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai. Then the king's fury subsided. Esther chapter 8, verses 1 to 17. On that day King Ahasuerus gave Queen Esther the house of Haman, the enemy of the Jews, and Mordecai came in before the king, for Esther had told him what he was to her. The king took off his signet ring, which he had taken back from Haman, and gave it to Mordecai. And Esther appointed Mordecai over the house of Haman. Then Esther spoke again to the king, fell at his feet, and wept, pleading with him to avert the evil of Haman the Agagite and the plot that he had devised against the Jews. The king extended the golden scepter to Esther, and she arose and stood before the king. She said, if it pleases the king, and if I have found favor in his sight, and the matter seems proper to the king, and I am pleasing to him, let it be written to revoke the letters devised by Haman the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, which he wrote to destroy the Jews in all the provinces of the king. For how can I bear to see the disaster that will befall my people? Or how can I bear to see the destruction of my kindred? King Ahasuerus said to Queen Esther, and to Mordecai the Jew, see, I have given Esther the house of Haman, and him I have hanged on the gallows because he laid hands on the Jews. Write in the king's name as you see fit concerning the Jews, and seal it with the king's signet ring, for a document written in the king's name, and sealed with the king's signet ring, cannot be revoked. So the king's scribes were summoned at that time, in the 3rd month, which is the month of Sivan, on the 23rd day. And it was written in the name of King Ahasuerus, and sealed with the king's signet ring. Letters were sent by couriers to all the king's provinces, to each province in its own script, and to each people in its own language, and to the Jews in their own script and their own language. In these letters, the king granted the Jews in every city and province the right to assemble and defend their lives, to destroy, kill, and annihilate any armed force of any people or province that might attack them, including their women and children, and to plunder their goods, on one day throughout all the provinces of King Ahasuerus, on the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar. A copy of the edict was to be issued as a decree in every province and published among all peoples, so that the Jews would be ready on that day to avenge themselves on their enemies. So the couriers, mounted on royal horses and riding on swift steeds, went out, urged on by the king's command, and the edict was issued in the citadel of Susa. When Mordecai left the king's presence, he took off his sackcloth and put on royal purple and white. He also wore a great crown of gold and a purple robe of fine linen, and the city of Susa shouted and rejoiced. The Jews had light and gladness, joy and honor. In every province and in every city, wherever the king's edict and his decree arrived, there was gladness and joy among the Jews, with feasting and celebrating. And many from the peoples of the land became Jews, because the fear of the Jews had fallen upon them. Esther chapter 9, verses 1 to 32. In the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, on the 13th day, the word of the king and his edict were to be carried out. On the day that the enemies of the Jews had hoped to gain power over them, it turned out the other way, so that the Jews themselves gained power over those who hated them. The Jews assembled in their cities in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus to lay hands on those who sought their harm, and no one could stand against them, for the fear of them had fallen on all the peoples. All the officials of the provinces, the satraps, the governors, and the royal administrators assisted the Jews, because the fear of Mordecai had fallen upon them. For Mordecai was great in the king's house, and his fame spread throughout all the provinces, for the man Mordecai had become increasingly powerful. So the Jews struck down all their enemies with the sword, killing and destroying them, and they did as they pleased with those who hated them. In Susa, the city itself, the Jews killed and destroyed 500 men, and they killed Parshandasa, Dalphon, Aspasa, Porasa, Adalia, Aridasa, Parmashta, Arisai, Aridai, and Vasasa, the 10 sons of Haman the son of Hamedasa, the enemy of the Jews. But they did not lay their hands on the plunder. On that day, the number of those who were killed in Susa, the city, was brought to the king. The king said to Queen Esther, "In Susa, the city alone, the Jews have killed 500 men, including the 10 sons of Haman. What then have they done in the rest of the king's provinces? What is your petition, and it will be granted you? What is your request, and it will be fulfilled?" Esther said, "If it pleases the king, let the Jews in Susa do tomorrow also according to today's edict, and let Haman's 10 sons be hanged on the gallows." So the king commanded that this be done. The edict was issued in Susa, and they hanged Haman's 10 sons. The Jews in Susa assembled again on the 14th day of the month of Adar, and killed 300 men in Susa, but they did not lay their hands on the plunder. The rest of the Jews in the king's provinces assembled, protected their lives, and got relief from their enemies, and they killed 75,000 of those who hated them, but they did not lay their hands on the plunder. This was done on the 13th day of the month of Adar, and on the 14th day they rested, and made it a day of feasting and rejoicing. But the Jews in Susa assembled on the 13th day and on the 14th day, and on the 15th day they rested, and made it a day of feasting and rejoicing. Therefore the Jews of the villages who live in the unwalled towns make the 14th day of the month of Adar a day of gladness and feasting, and as a holiday and sending gifts of food to one another. Mordecai recorded these events, and he sent letters to all the Jews in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus, both near and far, obliging them to observe the 14th day of the month of Adar, and also the 15th day of the same year, as the days on which the Jews got relief from their enemies, and as the month which had been turned for them from sorrow into gladness and from mourning into a holiday, that they should make them days of feasting and rejoicing, sending gifts of food to one another and gifts to the poor. So the Jews accepted what they had started to do, and what Mordecai had written to them. For Haman the son of Hamedasa, the Agagite, the enemy of all the Jews, had devised a plot against the Jews to destroy them, and had cast that is, the lot, to crush and destroy them. But when Esther came before the king, he issued a written edict to revoke the plot that Haman had devised against the Jews. So these days were called Purim, after the term Pur. Therefore, because of all that was written in this letter, and of what they had experienced in regard to this matter, and of what had happened to them, the Jews established and accepted it as a custom for themselves, and for their descendants, and for all those allied with them, so that without fail they would continue to observe these 2 days as prescribed, at their appointed time every year. These days are to be observed in every generation and every family, every province and every city. These days of Purim are not to be neglected by the Jews, and the memory of them is not to cease among their descendants. Then Queen Esther, the daughter of Abihail, with Mordecai the Jew, wrote with full authority to confirm this second letter concerning Purim. He sent letters to all the Jews in the 127 provinces of the kingdom of Ahasuerus, words of peace and truth, to confirm these days of Purim at their appointed time, as Mordecai the Jew and Queen Esther had prescribed for them, and as they had established for themselves and their descendants the practices of fasting and lamentation. The command of Esther established these practices of Purim, and it was written in the record. Esther chapter 10, verses 1-3. King Ahasuerus imposed tribute throughout the land, even to the coastlands of the sea. All the acts of his power and authority, as well as a full account of the greatness of Mordecai, to which the king had promoted him, are they not written in the chronicles of the kings of Media and Persia? For Mordecai the Jew was second in rank to King Ahasuerus, and was great among the Jews, and well received by the multitude of his brothers, seeking the good of his people and speaking peace to all his descendants.